History Channel to our weekend Q&A part 1. We do this every Friday and Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And today we are doing our first part. Tomorrow we'll do our second part, 6 p.m. Eastern. And then Sunday we have our live stream lecture, 4 p.m. Eastern. You can vote here on YouTube for what topic you would like to see us discuss here at the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel for our weekly live stream lecture every Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern. We're getting kind of a late start today because of different obligations that I had, errands that I did not know I had that came up at the last minute, and things that went longer than I expected to. So we are live. We are doing our normal Q&A, Ask Me Anything, for an hour or so. Yeah. So anyways, I'm going to answer all of your questions regarding history and social studies for the next hour or so, and then call it a day because I am exhausted. But yes, hopefully everyone's having a good start to their weekend. A happy Friday to all of you, and welcome to our Q&A. Ask Me Anything about history and social studies. We do this every Friday and Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern, and then Sundays at 4 p.m. Eastern is our live stream lecture about any particular historical topic that you can vote on. The poll will be available later tonight in the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel. But we've got my moderators, Harsh and Rodolfo, are here. That's good to see. Do you think the physical original copy of the United States Constitution will last forever? At some point, it's going to be so decrepit in age. Probably the latter. Does the Constitution philosophically exist outside of its physical form? Yes, the Constitution lays out the ideas for what America is supposed to be. That's why it has the reputation that it has. Rather than being determined by the government, it is determined by the people, and that's why other constitutions, which are far more technical, do not have a track record that the U.S. Constitution has. So, anyways. So yes, this is the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel. I'm going to find a nice historical background for you guys to enjoy here in the studio as we continue to grow and develop our channel. Here you go. This is a famous painting from the American Revolution. This is the famous Yankee Doodle Dandy painting. But yes, and I do have a tie on talking to 5 people. But more will come later, Jay. So anyways, no, I'm not sweating. Yeah. So anyways, hope everybody's having a good beginning of their weekend, and thank you for deciding to join us for the beginning of your weekend here at the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel, where we do history in a friendly, neighborly manner. If you have any questions or comments about history, social studies, anything you'd like me to discuss, a topic, drop it in the chat, and I'll be happy to answer. Consider liking and subscribing, giving a super chat, or becoming a member if you want bonus access, early access, early extra videos, and all of that great stuff. So my long-form video this weekend will be coming out tomorrow instead of today due to this delay, but it will be out as it usually is Mondays and Fridays at 8 p.m. Eastern, but we'll do Saturday and Monday this coming weekend and beginning of next week. So yes, I'm into fall colors because fall starts on Sunday, I believe. So good to see everybody. Hope you're all having a wonderful Friday. Yes, the evening is for relaxing and having fun. We'll see what kind of fun, what kind of trouble, what kind of mischief I get myself into. And Ozzy's already sharing one of his emojis. You can get a special one of those emojis by becoming a member. You also get early access to a lot of my short videos and long-form videos. I am currently making a series for members only about the Industrial Revolution. So if you want to learn about the different aspects of one of the greatest economic and industrial and technological changes in human history, please consider becoming a member for a monthly fee. You can also give a super chat if you want me to focus on a particular topic in depth. Any money you give to the channel helps the channel grow and is used by us to make everything around here better for all of you. And how does this affect the price of tortillas? I have no idea. I can talk to you a little bit about the history of tortillas, but yeah. What do you think of the financial system should have been in early America? National bank or none? The national bank, crafted by Alexander Hamilton, was actually pretty ingenious in that it took the debts from all the different states and former colonies, which mainly consisted of them failing to pay their troops. It took on the war debt from the American Revolution and it assumed a national state of debt. So it was a very federal move. It was by a Federalist, Alexander Hamilton, the Secretary of Treasury, and it helped stabilize the American economy and create a central nervous system to the American economy, which would help it grow exponentially in the early 19th century. So I don't know why, but I feel like you're the type of guy that would yap endlessly about history on YouTube rather than work. Okay, thank you. Yes, this is my work. So yes, I am that kind of guy. Appreciate you too, Ozzy. Thank you so much. But yeah, questions about history and social studies. Faded Chile. Maybe you want to talk about the country for whose name you bear, Chile, and I can talk a little bit about their history as well. Oh, thank you for joining us from Burkina Faso. We got people from all over the world who come to the Friendly Neighborhood History channel and learn about history and social studies from an American. Me, I don't share much of my personal information. You can figure out that I'm American pretty easily, but I don't even say which state I'm from, so yes. Um, was Spurius Cassius Vincilius some sort of plebeian politician? Why did the patricians put him to death after his term ended? I'm not sure. I don't know much about him. Tachi, hello, good to see you. I don't know everything. There's plenty of topics I'm still learning about, still garnering information about. So, but thank you for the recommendation. I'll have to look into Spurius Cassius Vitellius. Sounds like he's from the Cassius family, which is of course very famous. Cassius was one of the people who executed Caesar, who murdered him, who assassinated him. But a happy Friday to everybody. Welcome to the Friendly Neighborhood History channel and to our live stream Q&A. We do this every Friday and Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern, and our live stream lecture is Sundays at 4 p.m. Eastern. You can vote here on YouTube about what topic you'd like to see. We also have updates on other social media such as Instagram, X, Facebook, and everything. I'm answering whatever questions you guys have about history or social studies, so please consider liking and subscribing. But also, if you have a question about history, I'll be happy to answer. If you're enjoying the vibes, please sit back and relax and enjoy the hour you have with me. Agrarian reform in Rome. Yeah, the Roman Senate wasn't a place for reform. And the plebes really could get the ire of the Senate quite often. This might have been, I don't know if he was part of that movement, but there was a time when you had a group of people, the populares, who were working in the Senate as part of the patrician class for the interests of the plebeians and the rest of the Roman people, and they were considered the populars, so they were called the popular ones, so they were called the populares, whereas the optimates were the conservative branch of senators who tried to keep the status quo. And the patrician class, which was a totally class-based society, was the only part of Rome that could actually, of the Roman public, that could become senators. And so they held a lot of the keys to the political power through a genealogical oligarchy, if you have it. So I do all types of history, Tachi. I was just talking about Rome. There's our social media handles. Please follow us, and yes, double tap and like and all that. I'm not some kind of revolutionary, but thank you for recognizing this famous painting from the American Revolution, the improvised underdogs who managed to defeat the greatest empire in the world at the time. Plebeians could acquire land. Patricians were, by lineage, large estate holders. So a lot of the land was definitely held by the upper classes in Rome, but the plebeians could also acquire land, but they couldn't ever acquire enough land to become a patrician themselves. I want to learn about the history of the Jews and why they got kicked out of many countries in the world. Thank you very much. So there's many different reasons as to why the Jews have been kicked out of various different countries. There's various different countries that have expelled them. Many Arab states and Middle Eastern states expelled the Jews after the 1948 war and the dispossession of the Palestinians when Israel became a nation. In utter defiance of that, they expelled hundreds of thousands of Jews. European countries such as France and England expelled the Jews. Of course, the Nazis promulgated first expulsions and then later, of course, persecution and the Holocaust of the Jews. The Russians heavily persecuted the Jews. It's been a common habit for the Jews, because they do not assimilate, because they tend to be have cultural, social, and economic trademarks of success, to be targets of the majority population. I don't agree with Jacksonianism in the sense that I believe that everything about federalism was bad. I think that Jacksonianism had its the right part about becoming a more democratic society, listening to the voice of the common people, and creating a free and more opportunistic society for all people of different social classes. But I don't believe that Jacksonianism, and of course Manifest Destiny is a huge part of that, and that is how America comes to be America, sea to shining sea, and all of that. So I agree with that part of it, but it seems to have worked. But I don't agree with demolishing the national bank. I think Jackson was totally in the wrong to do that. I don't know about you, but I like the idea of communism. A lot of people like the idea of communism, but I don't know how that works, actually, liking the idea. I mean, in practicum, I think a lot of people can agree that it doesn't work. People can like the idea, but even the idea seems to have flaws and undermines its eventual. Because how do you actually enforce it? And violent revolution was the only answer that Marx and his successors could think of. What do you do? Slaves next? I don't know what you mean by that. Would it have gone communist during the Great? If a Confederacy somehow survived, let's just assume Lincoln was fine with the states voluntarily and peacefully leaving the Union. Do you think the CSA would have eventually ended slavery? Would it have gone to communist during the Great War, Interwar era? No, I don't expect it to have ever ended slavery. It was so entrenched in who they were in the South that yeah, I don't expect the Confederacy to have ever ended slavery. Um, yes, everyone hates because they're jealous. Yeah, exactly. USA shouldn't be a country. So you sound very British. What should I tattoo? I don't know. Ask them oil, what you should tattoo there. Dangerous. Um, I'm a big Thomas Jefferson fan, one of the best American presidents. Why did so many kings from England marry with children? The age of marriage back, especially in medieval times, typically if a woman was able to menstruate, she was considered to be fair game in the sense of being able to be wed or betrothed, and then when she would get a little bit older, to wed a prince, a duke, a noble, or a king. Is it true that John F. Kennedy was killed by Mossad? If the leaks that were released during Trump's administration, no, there's no evidence to corroborate that. He might have been. I'm open to any idea with John F. Kennedy because I don't think Lee Harvey Oswald killed him. So yeah. Unfortunately, America currently operates under a monarchy, a very strong presidency to be sure. Was Christopher Columbus racist? Yes, very much so. Columbus definitely felt that the indigenous peoples that he had found were inferior and subject to being enslaved or accepting the Christian faith and becoming civilized. He definitely found people running around half naked and in their ways of life to be extremely provincial and uncivilized. Um, Let me see here. He was in his mid 20s. Okay, which kings married children and who and what ages? It wasn't a specific group of ones. I can't name them all off the top of my head. There's several different instances in the history of Europe of that happening. I'm doing well, Freshly. I hope you're doing well too. We've got my wonderful moderators here. Give them some love. They hold down the chat. I will take Jefferson over Hamilton. Your thoughts on Native American genocide? The Native Americans were not genocided by white Europeans. The vast majority of Native Americans who died off died to disease, which was usually caused by accident and just by communication. It wasn't an intentional wiping them out by diseases. There are some instances where diseases were given to the natives purposefully, but usually that wasn't the case. I wouldn't consider it a genocide. You have wars and victims of wars. You have large numbers of Native Americans who are killed off in these wars by the Europeans and the Americans. I don't consider that a genocide. What do you think was the single most important purchase or transaction in the historical record? The Louisiana Purchase is definitely up there. Who killed Kirk? Tommy Robinson. If you want me to talk about politics or social issues or things like that, do a super chat and I'll go into depth. I don't want to talk about politics on this channel. This is the Friendly History channel, not the Friendly Neighborhood Politics channel. So did George Washington decide the election with... no, he did not do that. Was there any other American president to censor the media like Trump? Lincoln and FDR both censored the media heavily during during the Civil War and World War III, or World War II, as you might want to call it. I don't see, how is Trump censoring the media? You mean by banning the AP from being in his press conferences? What do you mean by that? Jefferson had multiple slave children. That's true, with Sally Hemings and other slaves that he had affairs with. JFK was accidentally shot by George, forcing the Secret Service asleep on the job from a rooftop. I don't buy that. Okay. I'm not deleting parts of history. I talk about history that's been deleted. I do my best to talk about as much history as possible. Who's killed Indian in America? I don't know what you mean by that. Wasn't the bubonic plague spread by fleas? Fleas that got into rats, and rats would typically be in the hulls and the cargo holds of ships, and these ships would arrive in European ports. That's why the bubonic plague lands in Venice, probably starts there in Europe. That's one of the biggest ports in at the time, and it spreads all throughout Europe. Do you give classes? The live stream lecture is kind of like a class. Do you think Teddy Roosevelt's push-up, expand, and modernize the Navy helped the United States win wars? Absolutely. I mean, he had this idea of an imperial presidency and an imperial United States, and you needed some sort of imperial power to be able to defeat other imperial forces like Japan and Germany. Hello, Karina. Good to see you. Yes, you've mentioned the 10,000 Jews killed by the fart, E-Dog. Thank you for bringing that up again. Interesting. His ancestral home, Peter. Thank you for sharing that. The Native Americans were genocided. I know that Hitler and the Nazis were inspired by segregation and other things, and by eugenics and Margaret Sanger. I'm very well aware of all of that. That's not the same thing. That's an apples and oranges comparison. How common were mutual duels as they're portrayed in movies, specifically Flintlock? Duels happened quite a bit. They were usually outlawed, but they were actually a popular way of settling beefs and battles, and they have European roots that become popular in America, particularly in the American South. Lincoln didn't grow hemp, but Thomas Jefferson did. Did Washington really cross the frozen river on Christmas Eve to slaughter a bunch of Germans? Hessian mercenaries who were fighting with their British allies at Trenton, New Jersey? Yes, Washington, it wasn't fully frozen. He was able to get across it. The schools here don't teach our children the real history. In Great Britain, I'm sorry about that. The United States isn't too far behind with that. Thank you for teaching people history without political agenda. Try to be as objective as I possibly can. Who would win, Anubis versus Hades? I'm going to take Anubis. Jackalhead. What would have happened if the second plane missed the South Tower? Would we have still gone to war? Probably. I mean, the damage was already overwhelmingly horrible. Should America be given back to the Native Americans? No. Just like England shouldn't be given, Normandy should not be, or England should not be given back to the French, and North Africa should not be given back to the Italians because of the Romans. That's my general belief. If you want to go down this chasm of recompense and reconciliation and reparations, it can go on forever and ever. Why do we always so arbitrarily start with 1500 and the arrival of Columbus and the Europeans in the New World? Because the technology of the Europeans allowed them to colonize Africa, colonize North and South America, and spread oppression like it had never been seen before. It wasn't that oppression was born at that time, it's that oppression was increased exponentially with the new technology that the Europeans had. And technology, as throughout all of human history, has the ability to uplift humans but also to hurt them in horrible, horrible ways. Why do presidents get killed when they oppose banks? Lincoln didn't get killed for that reason, and neither did James Garfield or William McKinley. The founding fathers were not old men. Some of them were. Rhodesia fell because of decolonization efforts by the British. Lincoln and the independence movement that was pretty radical in South Africa. Lincoln, JFK, bad man, shared the same woman with his brother, the whore. Yes, that's a rumor, but apparently John F. Kennedy, after having an affair with Marilyn Monroe while he was married as president, gave her to his brother Robert Kennedy to avoid a scandal. They chose evil. See, I'm going to talk about things that happened hundreds of years ago because I'm a history channel, and that's what we do here at the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel. Would the Terminator be lost media today if OJ got the role instead of Arnold? Yes, a lot of people would not want to watch it. It would be canceled. The Naked Gun's still uncomfortable because of that. What are your thoughts on Pan-Africanism and the idea that history has thoroughly been whitewashed and erased? There's definitely a lot of whitewashing and erasing and white saviorism in history, but I think more and more, especially in the last century, the way we talk about history, we don't just look at all of the good civilizing that the Europeans did in different areas they went. By how much did Barack Obama spend? As president, a few $1 trillion. I hate to say that casually, but that's true for all presidents in the 21st century, just to spend a few $1 trillion just casually. Your thoughts on the destruction of the Celtic societies by the Romans? The Romans were conquerors. Do the Maoris have a treaty with the British? They did, and the British violated them. I forget the name of it. I always forget it. Lincoln was the better president than JFK, but JFK had a lot of potential. So, anyways, I've actually caught up to the chat for once, so that's fun. So we're kind of going rapid fire. If you're liking what you're hearing, please like and subscribe and ask a question or drop a topic or a comment or something you'd like me to discuss. Now, is there any way right now anyone plans to cut down the debt? No. Both parties have basically decided we will be the party that demands the debt be cut, and then when we become the party in power, we will do nothing to actually do that. Let's prove the critics wrong. Vertical streams are overrated. Click like if you're a scholar. I agree. JFK was whoremaster before Clinton and Trump. Oh, well, he wasn't the first president to be a philanderer. Is America still in the colonial era? We still build colonial homes? No, that's an architectural taste. And the internet and our ability to access information so quickly makes it very easy for us to look at ancient or medieval or early modern designs and use them in our architecture and home building. Is George Washington rolling in his grave looking at modern America? Most of the founders probably would be. Was there actually weapons of mass destruction in Iraq? No. That was a false flag. What are some teachings of Jesus that modern Christians ignore the context of Rome when extrapolating lessons? I know one of one, turn the other cheek. Not talking about religion in particular, but Jesus was taught when he talks about going 1 mile and then walking another mile, that was how you were supposed to escort a Roman soldier, something like that. Who do you think killed JFK then? I think the best explanation is some high-ranking people in the government who wanted the United States more involved in the Vietnam War had Kennedy killed, because Kennedy wasn't going to get involved in the war, Elvis. That's my theory. Whose history would you say is more bloody, USA or Britain? The British, only because they've gone more places. Someone told me the British burned the White House in 1814. Is that true? Yes, it was part of them winning the 1812 war. Have a good day, E-Dog. Always great to see you. Who were the cycles? Don't know. What pacified the Vikings? The growth of kingdoms and stability? Kingdoms, international relations, trade, and Christianity. Numerous sources say 16th to the 19th century more slaves from European were brought to Africa than Africans to North America. That might be true. There was definitely a lot of slavery, of enslavement of Europeans by the Muslims in the Mediterranean and in North Africa. You had the Barbary Coast pirates, the first American conflict or war, whatever you want to call it, was fought there. Um, you think Neanderthals were genocided by sapiens in Europe? Probably not. Do you agree it's ridiculous that the Betsy Ross flag is racist? I've never even heard this argument, so it's probably wrong. Who is considered the worst dictator? I would say it's probably Stalin or Mao, but Hitler's obviously in the conversation as well. If you're looking at proportionality of violence and destruction of a society, Pol Pot is actually statistically the worst. He killed about a third of his population. Or a 12th, something like that. I think maybe a 12th of the population, which is more than any of the others did. What's the Epic of Gilgamesh? The Epic of Gilgamesh is an ancient Mesopotamian mythology, which basically tells of this man named Gilgamesh, who I think is seeking to please the gods. He basically is a demigod, and he's a hero who becomes an icon for the Mesopotamian people. Israel killed Charlie Kirk. Stop blame. Do we have to blame Israel for everything? Stop listening to Candace Owens. Listen to Friendly Neighborhood History instead, and move on. I see nothing to make me think that Israel had anything to do with either Kennedy's assassination or Charlie Kirk's. I mean, is it possible? Yes. Is it probable? No. Is there evidence for it? No. Why do liberals ignore MLK Jr. and abusing women? It's not just liberals. Almost everybody loves Martin Luther King, and no one wants to talk about him being a philanderer. You're so smart. Thanks for sharing your knowledge. Oh, but you're so kind, Buck. I really appreciate you. Zionists destroyed America. Yet, yes, the Groypers have arrived. How would things have been different if Britain didn't pass parliamentary reforms in the 1800s? Basically, by the 1830s, the British turned their monarchy from a constitutional monarchy, with the king having limited power, to a ceremonial monarchy, creating a figureheadship by the time Queen Victoria took over. Did Mossad kill Charlie? No. Should Africa pay for reparations? No. Who lived on Sicily in the first place, though? Tribes. How intelligent were they? The Greeks occupied Sicily. The Phoenicians got there. The Carthaginians were there for a while. Not sure exactly who. Surely there were ancient Greek and Roman curse words, right? Or at least words and topics that were considered culturally taboo. Yes, there were. For instance, the word excruciating was not supposed to be used by the Romans because it referenced the cross. Referencing crucifixion was considered to be a taboo for the ancient Romans because it was such a violent, painful, and humiliating way to die. Why did Oswald admit to doing it then? Did he lie? I don't know. He didn't admit to doing it. He said he was a patsy. Will we ever get the DMV rage back? We'll see how this chat goes. Is it true that slavery was started by Africans, the first people to take slaves on Earth? If you want to also say that humanity started in Africa, then yeah, sure, it'd be the Africans who started slavery, because slavery is a human institution that has existed in every single society with different shades and meanings based on the society and cultures in which they lived. So certain societies practice slavery differently only because of geographic, climatological, and economic needs. But you have slavery in ancient China, you have slavery in ancient Rome, and of course the Native Americans practiced slavery. In fact, the vast majority of the Native Americans who fought in the Civil War fought with the Confederacy so they could keep their slaves. Do you have to go to the DMV anytime soon? No. Jews were destroyed because of their betrayal of God. When they denied God in the flesh, God denied their blessings. Thank you for trying to turn us into a religious channel. And we finally got a super chat. Thank you so much. Dancing Israelis. I appreciate the super chat, but okay. No, Black Lotus, I would not do that. 20 million is more like it. No, just kidding. No. Was World War I inevitable, and was the peace treaty imposed on the vanquished unjust? Does appeasement still exist? World War II, in my opinion, the First World War is the 7 Years' War in the 1750s. Germany, once again, goes to war with a bunch of other people, and they actually won it this time. The Second World War, which I think is what you're talking about, the Great War, starts in 1914. I don't see it as an inevitability. I think the punishment was unjust, but when people make the argument that the Nazis came to power because of a Treaty of Versailles, they are actually making what the argument the Nazis themselves made. They're scapegoating the problems Germany was having on the war when it wasn't all of that at all. Agricultural revolution is indirectly the reason for all modern problems. That's what a lot of people think. I think that's wrong. Are you a history major, or is this just a hobby? This is a hobby, and I get some money out of it, and I get to interact with all of you wonderful people, and I am indeed I have a bachelor's in history and a master's in it. Why do Olmecs look African? I can't answer that. The Olmecs were a early Mesoamerican society that predated almost all the others, even the Mayans, and they are known for the giant stone heads. If you ever look at giant stone heads in different areas of Mesoamerica, most likely they were created by the Olmecs. Israel had a post of, they didn't kill Charlie, 1 hour post his death. Had a date of, okay. Still, I don't care, and that's because people probably immediately assumed that. Would slavery be a good solution for homelessness? Um, it wasn't like there weren't homeless vagabonds in the world before when slavery was around. Slavery is forced labor, and people can still be enslaved. Look at prisoners who are forced to do labor. That's a form of slavery that is allowed as punishment for a crime. I don't think that slavery would be a good solution for homelessness. I think it's you're out of the frying pan and into the fire. Looking at your videos, would you consider making longer videos, 15 plus minutes? If you want to watch my longer videos, Kala, go watch my tier ranking list of the presidents, the British monarchs, and the Russian czars. Those are all over 15 minutes easily. There are a couple other videos where I go long and talk for about 15 or 20 minutes. And then, of course, there's the live streams. King Charles is a friend of Muslims, not my king. Okay, Peter, you do you. Why do some black people think that Jesus was black and that they are Egyptian? Jesus was raised in Egypt, and there's a description in the New Testament that mentions Jesus having hair like wool, and it seems to be a more of an allegorical description of Jesus. But black Hebrew Israelites in particular seem to believe that proves that Jesus is black. King Charles is a sellout. Okay, then will there be slaves in a century or two? Or there's still slaves. There's millions of slaves all over the world. The continent with the most slaves right now, Africa, believe it or not. Did the ancient Egyptians ever get to the Grand Canyon? No. Quit asking. Honda, hello. Um, you should have a history off with UK's Al Murray. Sure. I have a history off too many times, Steve, with all of my own moderators and people who come on this channel. So, do you agree with Machiavelli's quote? It is better to be a feared leader than a loved one. There's weaknesses and strengths to both if we look at human history. Feared leaders like Ivan the Terrible and Stalin obviously are able to accomplish a lot, but their legacies and the world they leave behind is actually pretty weak. More benevolent rulers like Josip Tito have a legacy that is pretty strong, even if their own societies crumbled. So it's really who comes into power after a strong leader and what are the provisions that leader makes for success. Benevolent leaders, or leaders that are seen as more benevolent, are tended to be looked on more favorably. Look at an Abraham Lincoln or Theodore Roosevelt and compare them with a Stalin. I already made history when I was 28 years old. What about you? What did you do when you were 28? Why have Jews been kicked out of 107 countries? I've already answered this. Different reasons: discrimination, anti-Semitism, conflicts with the majority society, expulsion due to persecution, cultural envy, I would say. Um, Hello, Salinger. Does knowing the inevitability that people will always repeat themselves ever drive you to existentialism? No. Humans fall into these traps, but if we learn from things, if we learn from our own mistakes in our own lives, and we learn in a social, as societies, in a general way from our history, then we will not fall into those same traps. Would Winston Churchill's legacy be frowned upon if it wasn't for World War II, World War III? Would you consider him a good person or rather a product of his time with his imperialist views? He definitely had bad views about other races and groups, and he had this civilizing social Darwinist view of the British Empire, that it was the good and everyone else was bad and no one should want to leave it. And obviously this at least indirectly affected the way he treated the Indians in World War III. But Churchill was an interesting man. He was brilliant. He was intelligent. He predicted the rise of the Nazis and the Soviets. He knew the dangers of the world around him, and he was able to respond to them in a timely way. I have 2 live stream lectures on Churchill, so I'm obviously a fan. And I have a longer video, about 10 minutes or so, about Churchill, so go watch that. Hello, Chris. Good to see you. Christianity is the original history book. If not for religion, you wouldn't have a degree. Partially true. The Western society has definitely been formed in many ways by Christianity, but Herodotus and Thucydides were writing history books hundreds of years before Jesus lived. I'm concerned that I'm not going to get through all of the chat, Funny Egg. People sure weren't white 2,000 years ago. They were. I found out my family was Jew. Columbus was actually a Jew. They just found this out. Do you think Clint Eastwood would have won if he ran for president in the 80s or 90s? Be interesting, or governor of California. He was a mayor, I think. Does China still have slaves? People would argue that. Have you been to Egypt? No. Let me see here. George Washington was loved. Loved is better. You got an awesome shirt and tie there. Thank you so much. I really love this tie. It's like a gold. I'm not huge into fashion, but when it comes to ties, I'm all out. Christ born in modern Iraq. Black. No. Abraham Lincoln was a warmonger like Stalin. Abraham Lincoln did not kill 20 million of his own people, and instead of putting people into basic slavery, he freed them. But yes, being a dictator isn't a good thing at all. That's true. But Tito is loved overwhelmingly by Croats and Slavic peoples because of how he was able to bring Yugoslavia together and defeat the Nazis. Yes, I don't think he expected Wilson to be as bad as Wilson was, and he hated Woodrow Wilson, by the way. But yeah, it was kind of a big mistake getting involved with Taft. It would have been interesting to see if Taft had defeated Wilson or if Roosevelt could have defeated Wilson by himself. But his pride got in the way. Interesting. Seven who lived in Spain, they fled to Sicily for persecution. What time in history is this, and why did they go to Sicily to be safe? Seven brothers were Jewish. This would probably be in the 15th or 16th century during the Spanish Inquisition, which nobody expects. What is the history of scalping with colonial natives? Scalping was a native practice. It was seen as a reward, a sign of victory, where they would cut off the hairline and the skin around the hairline and expose the top of the skull. And it was seen as a reward, a prize, a trophy for native fighters. Not in all tribes, but in certain areas of native North America. What right does Israel have attacking Qatar? Israel believes in attacking Qatar that it is killing Hamas leadership, and I have actually heard and read about that being an issue where Qatar, despite playing the field as a more moderate voice, Israel is kind of shooting itself in the foot when it comes to long-term geopolitical peace. But the whole point is that Hamas leaders have been shielded and protected by Qatar in the past, and that's why Israel went after Doha a couple weeks ago. If you want me to talk more about the geopolitical situation and the Israel-Palestine conflict or any other political issues that you think that I should give my analysis on from a historical and social scientific point, please give a super chat or become a member, and then maybe I will be open to talking about it. I'm going to focus on history here. How do you address the lens that you see the world through when you're learning history? I do my absolute best to be as objective as I possibly can and consider all different sides and read all different perspectives. I just do my best to be as objective and honest and true as I can be, Nick. What is the history of scalping? I already answered that. Another channel I have never seen. Very cool. Well, it's great to have you, Julius. Please like and subscribe. Churchill was a scat fetishist who loved being spanked, and his mom was a prostitute. Yes, that's what people have said. That is not true. He was definitely an alcoholic, though. Is Putin a fascist? Putin's definitely fascistic. He has a nationalist sense of Russia rather than a communitarian sense like a Stalin would have had. Could you make a video on the Jews of Portugal? That'd be interesting. I could try. I don't know a huge amount, but talking about Jews in the Spanish Inquisition in Iberia at that time probably be big. Do you know much about Three-Eye Atlas? No. Did Croatian mercenaries invent the necktie? I've heard that story before. I'm not sure. I should know that. I love neckties, so. Just came back from South Africa. The incredibly massive and well-rounded gluteal proportions I saw in the country were life-changing. Never, for goodness sake, Cam, get your mind out of the gutter. Civil Rights Act destroyed African businesses. Not fully. Are humans all the same? If culture isn't considered, are there any differences, minor or major, or is it just pseudoscience? Culture is definitely a huge factor on how humans behave in certain areas, and culture is a huge waypoint of understanding if human beings in a society will be successful or not. But the truth of the matter is there are so many other factors that would indicate and underlie human beings. I think what culture does is humans are generally the same no matter where you go, but culture is a great way of understanding how successful human beings are going to be, what their lives will look like, and how they will live and interact with each other. And culture is undergirded by religion, by social norms, by economic policies, by all sorts of different things. Let me see. I do that to my friends. Okay, then. Who controlled the slave trade between the 8th and 12th centuries? Mainly the Muslims. Muhammad's wife was 6. He consummated the marriage when he was 9. He also started 87 wars in 10 years. Yes, and won all of them. Doesn't that disrupt the U.S. relationship of Israel as the U.S. allies with Qatar? If you want me to talk more about it, Daniel, consider a super chat. But you're not wrong. It definitely it's throwing a monkey wrench at a problem that's already wrenched up enough. From San Jose, California, did 23andMe and Ancestry's dad put single mom side Italy than Mexico? Interesting. What is your favorite quote from Machiavelli you agree with? Probably the one you quoted. Don't you think Bibi should just explain the red heifers and Temple Mount to the world? It would only help at this point. No. Fulfilling Bible prophecy is not on Netanyahu's mind. Many times over, Geronimo Pratt. How many times over? Okay, then. I don't know what you're talking about. If I haven't answered your question, I promise I will get there. I am just going through every question, trying to address every single thing that's on topic as I can. Was Union victory mainly due to material advantages like industry or in manpower, or to strategy, leadership, and politics such as emancipation, consider theaters, Confederate choices, and black troops? The former. But the latter is important. Bringing in African American soldiers after the Emancipation Proclamation, like the Massachusetts 54th, was a huge win for Lincoln. It also pushed Britain and France away from the Confederacy. I would have to look and see who Peter Francisco was, and Henry David Thompson while I'm at it. The Union had the political and resource capital in the Civil War, definitely. What did you eat for breakfast today? I don't eat breakfast, I drink coffee. Was the American Revolution maybe on the weekends I'll eat breakfast. Was the American Revolution an even fight? Was there a possibility colonists lost? There's a huge possibility, over and over again. Washington crossing the Delaware, that was them at their desperate moment. The French were definitely a huge, huge turning point. When are we getting Canada? I don't know if we're getting Canada or if we're just tacoing. Are the Chicago Bears cursed? Yes. Why did Mike Johnson bring him a Calvin? Oh, for goodness sake. A man-to-man Canada will eat you. If we tie the USA dollar to Bitcoin like we did gold till 1971, does this help? Probably stabilizes the value of a dollar, but as Bitcoin increased, but given the value of Bitcoin, it could really hurt the inflation thing right now. Let me see here. Will I find true love? Sure, just look in the right places. You're welcome, Cheryl. Canada might just split. There's a lot of people in Canada who actually want to be part of the United States. Canada has economic, immigration, and social problems right now that is really hindering it. Just because, and they've become politically stabilized, but they've got a lot of other issues, and they're falling behind the United States in many major economic fields and facets. Yeah, the Buffalo Bills are already going to the playoffs. That's for sure. Was 1750 a turning point in the Enlightenment? No, 1754 was when the French-Indian War broke out, which was the precursor to the 7 Years' War, aka World War I. The never-long video of mine you can watch. Around these parts, we call the Civil War the War of Northern Aggression. Yes, I know, and it wasn't. Canada is messed up. No thanks. Canada is beautiful and incredible and has a great history and an amazing society, but there are certain problems it's dealing with right now. I'm fresh out of Mexican workers due to ICE. Can we capture Canadians and use them as indentured servants? What on earth? Just hire Americans if you want to complain, Jack Sparrow. Oh, wait, you're just trying to troll. Can you talk about the Great Mosque in Cordoba? Basically, Islam, in many of its conquering facets, in many of the areas that it conquered, be it in North Africa or Israel or Palestine or Turkey, of course, the Hagia Sophia is an example of this, the Dome of the Rock and Al-Aqsa Mosque, that compound is an example of this, and so in Cordoba, those are seen, mosques are built by Muslims when they conquer. Not all the time. If Muslims living in a particular community peacefully build a mosque of it, they can worship Allah properly, and that's, especially from an American perspective, perfectly kosher. No pun intended. But that is a sign of Muslim colonization in the first century after Muhammad's death, what I call a century of conquest. When was the last time America was great? Don't know. Josh Allen is going to cry. Okay, then. Greetings from northern Minnesota. Beaver, thank you for joining us. Factually, the North invaded the South. Yes. No, that's not true. The South attacked a northern fort, and then the North invaded the South. The South was fighting a defensive war. The North's job was to defeat the Confederacy. The Confederacy's job wasn't to conquer the North. It was to get the North to stop and to get them to basically admit that that they could have their own country. Let me see. Though you called me a name earlier that I don't understand, I still like you. Just thinking topic strategy would be less chaotic. I do topic strategies with the live stream lectures. Now I'm just answering questions, King James. Yeah, they are allies. That's true. Thank you, Immer, for liking. Out of all the colonies, why the Delaware of all people the first to join the Union? I don't know why Delaware was the first and Rhode Island was the last. When you're ordering who ratified the Constitution, I didn't call you a name at all, by the way, hey, King James. That was someone else. Who is Lady Liberty and Lady Columbia, and what are their histories? Lady Liberty is a French concept. It's similar to Columbia. Columbia, I think, is from ancient Greece. But basically, they're both bearing torches of light, which hints at illumination and knowledge. They are women. I don't know exactly the entire psychology behind them, but they are supposed to be symbols of enlightenment and knowledge and power and freedom. And of course, the French built the Statue of Liberty and gave it to the United States as a gift. The United States put it outside of New York Harbor, and of course, when Ellis Island opened, it was the perfect thing for the immigrants to see when they first came to the United States, starting in 1892. Out of all the colony, okay, I already answered that. BlackRock is trying to buy the utility companies around the Great Lakes for data centers and shores. So sad. I've heard that before. What pelts were more popular in Vancouver territory? Beaver, different types of bear pelts, if I'm correct. I have a questionable question. Who do you think better, Jews or Muslims? Are you talking about religions? Muslims are not an ethnic group, and Jews are not a religious group. If you're asking about about which religion is better, Judaism or Islam, I can't really comment, and I'm not going to comment on ethnic groups. Muslims have majorly been seen as Arab, but there are huge numbers of Muslims in Indonesia, Malaysia, and India, and of course in Africa as well. I wasn't talking about you, King James, when I said that. Do you wear a wristwatch? No. Why do Jews have to force white people to mix with blacks? Is it to make them dumber and easier to? Jews don't do that. A Muslim asked a girl from New York City if he could screw her. I don't really want to hear about it anymore. It's already lost my interest. Was Coolidge and Hoover's fear of government dependency getting too big a valid fear? Not in the context of a Great Depression for Hoover. Why are celebrities so vile? They're powerful. Celebrities, believe me, if you look at history, celebrities have been pretty indulgent. Modern celebrities are tame in some ways to that. compared to the ancient world. Like, for instance, there was an actor who threw orgies in the palace of the Emperor Claudius while he was having an affair with Claudius's wife, who then tried to overthrow Claudius. I'm not a celebrity. I'm 50. The new lingo is confusing. Fair enough. Being Jewish ain't an ethnicity, but a religion. No, Judaism, Jews are an ethnicity. Judaism is the religion. Do you think America should shift more to isolationism? I'm not going to share my particular political perspectives. If you want my insight on politics and a particular political topic from a historical perspective, please do a super chat, Nick. I think the United States has been isolationist for a long time in its history. Johnny, hello. War of Independence is BS. Make America British again. Yes, Britain would love that, wouldn't they? Adding 50 provinces that are all extremely conservative compared to them. Why doesn't Eastern European countries have more notoriety? The shadow of the Cold War, the Nazi invasions, they've been seen as backwards compared to Western European societies which built empires like Britain and France. Can we start a convention for the next few live stream about why the United States didn't lose the War of 1812 but had a stalemate? Yeah, we can start a conversation, but you will lose it. Do you think the U.S. could ever become like a Handmaid's Tale? No. I think that's over-exaggerated nonsense from people who hate Donald Trump and the right. Was the Battle of Trafalgar indirectly a big factor in England? I mean, I don't think Donald Trump is a Nazi, and I don't think Kamala Harris is a communist, if you want to go back into the most recent political election. Those are terms people do not use because they do not know. I literally ran into a guy who was going to one of these anti-No Kings protest nonsense, and he had a sign that said, "We're not down with fascism." I said, "What is fascism?" And he couldn't tell me. He said, you ever heard of a Nazi?" And I'm like, "Well, what's a Nazi?" And he said, "Well, you're probably a Nazi." And I'm like, "Oh, great comeback." People don't know, and yet they use these terms in broad brush strokes. So no, we're not going into a fascist or communist hellscape. Hitler versus Napoleon, who wins with equal army and technology? Napoleon. Hitler made way too many rash decisions. Was the Battle of Trafalgar indirectly a big factor? England went on, England Franco. If Napoleon didn't invade Russia, okay, you redacted a message I was reading, so that's not helpful. Or maybe I just skipped the chat. But yes, basically, Trafalgar allowed the British to remain independent, allowed the English commerce to continue. It showed their naval dominance and basically forced Napoleon to create the continental system, which the violation of which would send him invading Russia in 1811. Do you think the USA will fall just like Rome and the British Empire? Yes, they're empires with hegemonic influence. What's your opinion on Persian people? Fascinating. Love Persian people, love Persian history. You should vlog. I'd watch that several times. Okay, then. Thanks. Hi, Virginia. Thank you for joining us. Faraz, good to see you. And yes, ask a question the historian will answer. Please like the live while you're at it. Does anyone know or care about Belarus? I don't know why Belarus is different. I believe it was its own Soviet republic. The Soviet Union had different socialist Soviet republics within it. I believe Belarus was its own, and it's a group of Russian people, ethnically Russian, who see themselves as different, and they became the Belarusians in the 1990s. Give Russia Alaska back. It was a scam back in the days. True, but the United States ended up benefiting from it, getting the wood, the oil, and the gold. And the United States didn't think that at first, which is why they called the guy who purchased it, William Seward, they called it Seward's Folly. You're very welcome, Faraz. It's always great to see you here. Thoughts on the Armenian people. Fascinating people. Wonderful history. First nation to adopt Christianity as its official state religion, but not the last, to be sure. And if you want to learn about the tragedies of what the Armenians had to face during the Great War, go and watch my video on the Armenian and Greek genocide. What was the relationship like between the British and Ottoman Empire? Topsy-turvy. The British, at some certain periods, like during the Crimean War, in order to hurt Russia, and during the Napoleonic Wars, in order to hurt Napoleon, helped the Ottomans, but they did everything they could to undermine Ottoman influence in Africa, especially in Egypt. And then during the Great War, they employed the Arabs, with the help of men like T.E. Lawrence, to have a revolt and overthrow the Ottoman control over Arabia and Palestine. What do you think about the Nepal protests? Don't know enough about it. Prophet Muhammad lived in the desert where people's puberty timeline runs different. Additionally, British queens were married around the same age and they didn't live in the desert and weren't Bedouin. None of that is true, but okay, thank you. Yes, it's true that they lived in a different area of the world. I mean, the Virgin Mary was probably around 13 or 14. That's still significantly older. That's still old enough to menstruate. 9-year-old, really, you very rarely see someone who menstruates when they're 9. Especially back in those days when you didn't have all these toxic chemicals. But really, most English queens who were married did not consummate when they were 11 or 12. Some of them did, or some of them did marry that young. The vast majority did not. And I mean, yes, I know that you're calling him Prophet Muhammad, but please explain to me, thank you, how Muhammad lived in Mecca, because I still haven't gotten an answer to that, and how he was able to recite the Quran. The Nazi concentration camps, have you been to see in prison? No, but I should. In person, sorry. Hitler and Napoleon made same mistake fighting two-side war and fighting Russia in winter, just saying. True, but Napoleon had more reason in my mind to invade Russia than Hitler did. It made sense to turn against Russia at that point. Hitler was just ideologically obsessed. Biz, great question about the British and the Ottomans. What happened on Jekyll Island, 1914, around Xmas? Isn't that where they met and decided to come up with the Fed? And the Fed was already extant, so it would probably be a meeting before that. I'd say the United States showed amazing courage in the War of 1812 and in bringing their first major war. They held up very well. Yes, that doesn't mean they won. The Armenian struggle is so similar to the Jewish struggles. Yes, and you have to talk about both because they're part of history. What was the point of Yugoslavia? Basically, after the Austro-Hungarian Empire was dissembled at the end of the Great War, you had a bunch of different people who all wanted to create their own countries, and the Europeans thought that would be too messy, and in many ways they were right, so they just kind of threw the Slovaks, the Slovenians, the Croats, and the Slavs into this one group, this one big country along the coast, near the Dalmatian coast, called Yugoslavia. Joey, good to see you. Hola. So nice to see you stream again. Cheryl, so nice to have you here. Thank you for joining us from Israel, Fog. We have people who join us from all over the world. What do you think about the Civil War? The South got its rears handed to them by the more industrialized North. Learn more about that by becoming a member, and you get access to my Industrial Revolution video series. A new nation like America being able to raise a military when the nation is split so much about it, invading Canada 3 times during the war. Yes, they lost every time they invaded Canada, though. Even your grandpa married at 11. How wasn't 9 okay? Dumb, huh? Okay, my grandpa didn't marry at 11, but I'm glad you know more about my grandpa than I do. Do you think the only reason why the United States was halted is because at the beginning had a very bad infrastructure and coordination of the army, which gave the Canadians the advantage? Yes, and the British were able to fight Napoleon and the Americans. During the American Revolution, did people really think of themselves as American the way they do today? No, but there was this growing concept of being different than being a British subject, and not wanting to be called a rebel or a traitor. So you have to call yourself something, so you call yourself an American. Hitler was addicted to amphetamines, as were many Nazis. Can you explain what fascism is in a short explanation as possible? Fascism is a militaristic nationalist movement, usually associated with the far right, although it originates from the far left, which is why in history it's a horseshoe. Historical politics is a horseshoe, not in modern politics. When I vote, I don't think in terms of horseshoe. I think in terms of spectrum, like a lot of people do. But in history, it's definitely a horseshoe, with Hitler and Stalin really not ending up being that different. But basically, it seeks to run all of the different sectors of a nation in order to make the nation as powerful as possible, and to promote its nationalistic, if not racial, superiority compared to others. There's a definite, and it's often violent, it's anti-democratic, it's illiberal. There's a quick definition of it. I actually explained what it is, and I didn't have to call someone a Nazi to do it, and that doesn't fit Donald Trump, so no, he's not a fascist. Moving along. When did he start the Civil War with Iron Man? When they ran out of baby oil. When did the U.S. and U.K. went from being enemy to being allies? Mid-19th century. They ended up realizing there was more they shared than had opposed, and after the Civil War in particular, the British and the Americans, both industrializing societies, knew they needed each other. What was the end goal of the United States by the end of the war? Even as time went to progress, what did people want? They wanted not to get their rears handed to them. They wanted to be able to rebuild the capital the British burned. There's that. I'm thinking of facts. Good, Joey. You can once again present your facts that will tell us that Muhammad, Buddha, and Gandhi were all Mexicans. The Civil War was won by Zionist pigs. Yes, I know. Everything was won by Zionist pigs because Zionist controls everything because Abraham Lincoln was a Jew. Dear God. Other than Korea, has there ever been an enforced demilitarized zone? There is one in Cyprus, technically, right now, between the Greeks and the Turks. And there have been in different areas. China and Russia had one for a period, I think. Is there anywhere on Earth that a new country could start? Palestine. Let's start there. Did you Google that moon landing never happened? No, because I used my time wisely. When you read about American Civil War, you look from the northern perspective or both sides' perspective or from outside perspective. I look at it as the United States of America going to war with the Confederacy. And yes, I know the Confederates were Americans. I look at it from both sides because that's the only way you can look at things. But of course, I'm rooting for the North the entire way. The more I watch your streams, I realize that history is an account of conflict. And in its ruling products, I don't know what you mean, Striker, but it's good to see you. Why are leftists allied with Islamists? If you want me to talk politics, Michelle, give me a super chat or become a member or something like that. I don't talk about politics in detail here on the channel on the live streams anymore because people just want to drag that out. I don't share my political beliefs, but basically I'll tell you this. Multicultural thinking tends to look at people in groups that seem to be oppressed or in areas of the world that have been historically oppressed and imperialized as victims, and sees their reaction to that oppression as radicalization. So there's a lot of sympathy from left-wing thinkers towards Muslims, even radical Muslims, despite the fact that they're totally different. Why is the term fascism and communist too often thrown around nowadays? Because it's we don't know what it is. It's just a boogeyman. It's very scary, and they both are bad and mean the loss of freedom. And in America, that's abhorrent to both sides. What was the breaking point for Yugoslavia after Tito died? You ever see audit videos? No. Did the Brits give up on American colonies partly due to the soil being wrecked from years of tobacco farming? No. That's a rumor, but they did give up on them eventually. Okay, so if the United States wanted to stay stable in the peace treaty with the war, the United States was able to do that on top of gaining new military experience and knowledge. It was a stalemate. No, you gaining something from war, having certain things that you gain from war, doesn't mean you win the war. That is absurdity. That doesn't mean you gain certain things from the war. You gain some experience points. Wow, yes, because the only way you can even have that perspective is because the United States is such an infantile country when it goes up against the largest empire in the world that was able to double fist them and the French under Napoleon. So yes, you've triggered my DMV rage, dark, friendly history. But the truth of the matter is, Harsh, you can't say that the Americans got a stalemate out of that war when the British were basically able to flick them off like a bug off a wrist while still beating Napoleon. Should we take the Panama Canal back? I have no idea. You decide. When will we see anarcho-syndicalism come into favor? I don't want to see it at all. Should we give Guam to Israel? Yeah, sure. You know what? Let's give Aiden, since you only want to talk about Israel, let's just give everything to Israel. I'm secretly an Israeli plant being paid by AIPAC. Candace Owens knows all about it. Just watch her next few videos. When I get famous, she will explain to you how I am a Jewish shill. Even though I am not Jewish and I'm not a shill. And if AIPAC was paying me, I'd be able to afford even better equipment than I have right now, and I wouldn't be asking for super chats. There. Good. I read there is a cave in the Grand Canyon with Egypt artifacts and it's closed down to the public. I've heard about this, but I think it's a conspiracy theory. The Gilgamesh theory isn't a widely recognized or factual theory, but likely refers to conspiracy theories linking the 2003 Iraq invasion to the discovery or looting of artifacts related to the epic. I've heard this theory before, that there was a raid in Iraq and other parts of the Middle East of ancient artifacts. I just don't know if it's true. There's not enough evidence for it. Have you seen the Greater Alaska proposal from Monsieur Z? No, and I don't think I want to. Is OT true that Hitler at first wanted to just deport the Jewish people, but because no one let them, he decided to genocide them? Partially. He wanted to send them to Madagascar, and the French wouldn't let him do it. Any tips on how to vote objectively? What is better? Do you do it a bit differently from... Yes, I look at history, I look at candidates, I look at proposals, I look at ideas from historical lenses, and I look at what's happening in the world around me. I don't just vote, and I look at the person. So I vote on multiple different bases. Did Israel gain the West Bank in war? If so, why is it contested? Israel gained both Gaza and the West Bank in wars. They gained the West Bank from Egypt, or the West Bank from Jordan, Jordan, and they gained Gaza and from Egypt and the Golan Heights from Syria. I think in the 6-Day War in '67. If the United States was able to fulfill their goal, it wasn't their goal. Their goal was to stop British impressment, which stopped anyways because they defeated Napoleon. And it wasn't their goal. Their goal was to beat the British and to take large sections of Canada. That didn't happen. No, they didn't stalemate the war. You don't know how stalemates work. Honestly, would it be fun to see Germany and Russia go to war again? I don't want to. I don't think it'd be fun at all. Why haven't we been able to return to the moon? America returned to the moon multiple times and eventually just decided to set its gaze with the Viking missions on Mars. What is your favorite revolution in history? Probably the Russian one. You could be a hairy British fan defending the UK for him while he isn't here. I'm not defending the UK. I'm defending history. This is the problem. My own moderators don't seem to understand this. My job is to talk about history and to defend what I know to be true about history. Past, present, all of it. Contemporary, ancient, medieval, early modern, whatever era, whatever place. And when people just decide they have to lionize the heck out of their own country and ignore all of its warts and problems and never want to admit to any screw-ups, then that's a problem because history is full of humans, and humans existed in 1812 America and in the British Empire, and they made horrible mistakes. Greater Idaho might actually be a thing. We'll see. What is your favorite revolution? Already answered that. Think the U.S. is just a British sequel? Somewhat, but better. it's more hegemonic than it is an empire. Many people point out the U.S. better casualty rate compared to the Vietnamese ones. People claim USA haven't lost. What are your thoughts? Stupid. Another stupid argument, little duck. The United States wanted a non-communist sector of Vietnam. It didn't happen. They wanted to maintain. The nation almost broke apart because of the war. Having less casualties doesn't mean you win or lose. Will Haiti have a president anytime soon? Who knows? What country or culture would you say is the most misunderstood? The Persians, definitely. I would say the Persians are up there. What is your... the Jews also, as a people group, are certainly misunderstood. I think the British are highly misunderstood. The Russians are... Actually, my choice would be the Russians. Nobody quite understands the psychology of what makes the Russians Russian. And World War III did start in 1937 with the Chinese attacking at the Marco Polo Bridge. Why so many Indians in the U.S. now? Immigration, better cultural ties, globalization. There's lots of Indians in America. Well, if we're asking why the U.S. has gone back to the moon, why don't we not have more nuclear power plants? They want one on the moon now. It's not genuine by you. I said that their goal changed over time, which means that their goal was to get any leg up over the British by like 1814 when they... So the Americans shift the goalpost and then say they could win? That's not how you win a war. The British crushed the Americans, burned their capital, and then the Americans get two consolations, the Star-Spangled Banner and Andrew Jackson. That's it. They didn't get anything else. They managed to win a couple of victories against a very distracted empire that had burned their capital. If you burn someone's capital, you won. And it wasn't the British who asked for the war to stop. It was the Americans. What are the qualities of a successful insurrection? I don't know. Ask Donald Trump. He's good at causing insurrections. What do you think of the lost cause myth? Absolute folderoy. My first video ever on YouTube, or my second video ever on YouTube. I was surprised to see hundreds of people watched it, and then now I've been surprised since then because hundreds of thousands, millions of people watched my videos. But the first short I ever made was talking about the lost cause myth and what a nonsense idea it is. Why are countries recognizing Palestine as a country? Isn't that rewarding them for October 7th? Recognizing the Palestinian Authority and the West Bank as a country is not the same as recognizing Hamas as the legitimate government of Gaza. How did North Africa become the Arab world? Muslim influence. It's called the Maghreb. The Berbers, the Umayyads, and the Abbasids controlled it for a long time. Rome. Are we similar in design? Actually curious. The Americans were definitely inspired by neoclassical art and architecture that was very popular in the 18th century that glorified the Greeks and the Romans. World War III started in 2014. No, World War III started in 1937. That's what I meant about my comment prior. Historical anthropology being discussed mainly in terms of conflict instead of greatness and invention. That's why I'm friendly history, because I talk about history in the goods, in the amazing achievements. If you want to know more, become a member and watch my videos about the Industrial Revolution. There's one, I've made one up available to the general public, and there'll be more coming soon that are for members only. I'm also doing a long-form video series on the Supreme Court for everybody. So yes, check those out. What is the difference between a nation and an empire? A nation usually only controls a certain amount of land with only its group of people in there, and an empire will control multiple countries, multiple different areas, and multiple different ethnos within that country. What do you think of... I already answered the last cause. Opinions on Nick Fuentes. Please stop. Nick Fuentes. Obviously charming, likable in the sense that he just takes whatever headline he thinks is applicable to a situation and applies it. Doesn't understand history. And I find him to be... If anyone is controlled opposition on the right, he would be that. Similar to how you could argue that some of the things that people like Ilhan Omar, who is a congresswoman, do is so hurtful to her own cause that she could very well be considered controlled opposition. But Nick Fuentes does more damage to the side he claims to be on than to the other side. And some people think that makes him objective. I think that makes him a grifter. So, yeah, and he obviously is very historically illiterate, has horrible views about race. I'm only answering because I usually don't want to talk about him. I usually don't want to talk about politics without a super chat. But people bring him up to me all the time. I'm not saying the guy isn't talented. I'm not saying the guy isn't knowledgeable about certain things. I'm saying I can see through it. I'm not nearly as successful as him. I don't have nearly the platform he has, and that makes me sad. Not because I'm so envious, but because I really wish people were more interested in learning actual tactile things rather than just swallowing red meat headlines. Is it accurate to say that the U.S. history is still a continuation of England history until 1776, like there was one history? Yeah, but colonial history developed in its own vein thanks to salutary neglect. I am not a Jew. Do you like the movie Genie with Gone with the Wind? Great movie. I don't care that it's obviously telling it's the lost cause myth, it's glorifying the South. There were many interesting and fascinating people in the South. The South wasn't all bad, full of horrible, evil people. The vast majority of Southerners never owned slaves or owned only one or two. That's still not okay. But my point is that it definitely is historically biased, but it's still a fantastic film. How did Saudi Arabia attack the USA and USA attack Afghanistan? Osama bin Laden was supposedly in Afghanistan and had been funding and supported by terror in Afghanistan for quite some time, and the United States had known that because they had helped him build up his empire in order to overthrow the Soviets in the Mujahideen in the Afghan-Soviet War in the 80s. Please like, subscribe. Yes, knowledge is priceless. Is there a wrong mainstream historical view which you despise? There is a mainstream view that I despise. There's a lot of different views, competing views that I despise. I mean, the World War thing's probably my biggest one. There's been two. No, there's been three. Empire equals border, nation equals people. Not really. War of 1812 benefited the Americans a lot. Yes, having some side benefits to the war isn't really true. And they really didn't benefit them. They got no land. They got their capital burned. Madison had to live in the Octagon for years. Monroe the White House wasn't rebuilt, I think, in time for Monroe to move in when he became president, or it had just been rebuilt. So Downing Street wasn't harmed. Canada wasn't taken. The U.S. gained nothing from the war. Thousands of men lost their lives, and you get the Star-Spangled Banner out of it. So no, the Americans did not gain a lot from that war. No, the Americans got experienced so much for their military tactics and officers like when we scalped the war. Yes, I understand. Many of America's chief military officers of the 19th century got their start in that war. What does that prove? It's like saying George Washington, because he got started in the French-Indian War, owes everything to the British. That's so ridiculous. We didn't win the war. It's definitely not disingenuous, but Hars, you don't know what disingenuous means. Someone please put the definition of disingenuous in the chat so my moderator can finally learn what disingenuous means. So let me see here. Architectural feats, moments of astounding compassion, genius, stories of endurance and the pioneering spirit of man. I'll go over and become a member friendly. I do enjoy your deeper dives. Yes, I think you'll like that series. I'm going to get that started. I'm going to get that going in the next week. You'll have at least 1 or 2 videos up there. Why do you think Russians are the most misunderstood people? Because a lot of people don't understand the psychology of invasion. They don't understand why Russia became so massive, and they don't understand Russia's continual push and pull, love-hate relationship with the Europeans and how that's influencing what they're doing right now. How important was the Spanish Empire in modern history? My British friend says they were irrelevant. Compared to England, they were pretty irrelevant. I mean, you got to be impressed by the Spanish Empire, but by the 18th century, they were very much an afterthought in European politics and were just a place to waste your time with war. Look at the 7 Years' War, or the 8 Years' War, the 9 Years' War, the War of the Spanish Succession. Spain fell out of prominence and was an afterthought in the 7 Years' War, and kind of helped America during the American Revolution, wasn't much involved in the French Revolution. Then Napoleon puts his brother on top of their throne, and when that happens, there's a civil war in Spain, and all of their colonies collapse in Central and South America. They were resting on laurels from the 15th and 16th centuries. Napoleon was definitely a nationalist. How important? Charlie Kirk was a racist coward, a Jew shill who spread hate and bigotry. He's convinced mediocre, ignorant, incel, loser, white boy that a race war is the answer for their problems. Low IQ. Okay, even if all of that were true, and by the way, very little of it is true, does that justify killing him and then celebrating him being murdered? Is Hindustan a nation or an empire? Hindustan is the ancient name for India. I would consider that to be an empire. You have the Mughal, you have the Delhi Sultanate. It's only the British who turned India into a nation. Nick Fuentes has matured more recently and only studies history insofar as it supports his current contrarian agenda. Yes, supporting history only for your agenda makes me leery of you. Peter, okay, let me see here. Muslims shouldn't be allowed to hold government in the West, not worth the risk. Thank you for exposing bigotry. Thank you. We needed an example of bigotry, and we got it. Why was there no call for a Palestinian state when Egypt or Jordan were occupying them? They were seen as refugees, and those areas were occupied by those places so that the Palestinians' rights would be protected and the Israelis would not butcher them like they did during the Nakba. See? You call me a Jew, and I'm going to tell you all the things bad Israel's done. You call me a leftist, I'm going to tell you all the bad things that leftists have done. Don't pigeonhole me. How important was the Spanish Empire? I already answered this. Used to work at an orange juice factory. Well, Stephen, good for you. Spain was very relevant. Not much. The Portuguese paved the way for Euro empires. Very true. The Portuguese developed a mercantile empire in the West. Nick Fuentes is a paid Qatari shill. Careful, TNY, or he'll say you're a paid Qatari shill. You asked me to explain how Prophet Muhammad lived in Mecca and how he was able to recite the Quran. I'm not able to answer that on the live stream. However, could you please visit the nearest Islamic center? Yeah, I've read the documents. I've looked at the history. Go watch my videos on Islam. Since you brought up Prophet Muhammad, I'm going to mention that you're going to have to answer for that marrying a 6-year-old thing, but also, more importantly, there is no historical evidence that he lived in Mecca, and there is no historical evidence that he wrote the Quran, or even recited writings down from the Quran. Of course, Muslims don't believe that Muhammad actually wrote the Quran. That's why the name Quran means recitation. However, that being historically unprovable is not even the issue. Even if he wrote the Quran, is historically basically unfounded. Can you refute something in history Nick claims, just so that we can know better? He doesn't talk about history enough. I'll be very frank with you. I need to give him his history talks a listen. I'm listening to the way he talks about modern politics, geopolitics, and social issues, and I see somebody who just kind of picks the worst bad faith argument he can make about his opponent, and then blasts that, and twist narratives that actually have nuance to them. So I do daily news updates here on the channel. I look at news, I look at all the different information around it, and I've seen him then I watch a video of his, or it comes up on my stream because the TikTok or YouTube gods decide that this is worth wasting my time over, and he literally is being disingenuous about that same headline that I know the full story about. I'm from the United States. I don't share more than that. How important was the Spanish? I've answered this many times, Josue. You can only ask once. I promise I will get to it. Is Great America got whooped a few Somalians with spears? What? How did Vietnam, which war was this? How did Vietnam survive won so many conflicts in the 20th century as underdogs? Using the terrain to their advantage. Against the French, the Americans, it worked out. Is it accurate that nationalism did not exist before French Revolution? Is it true? Nationalism is a response to French hegemony in Europe. So the Germans and the Italians do a lot of that. Okay? I despise the idea that the South wasn't constitutionally justified. The South was constitutionally justified to exist, not to secede. There was no constitutional justification for the secession. Can you give an example of a historical movie that is inaccurate? Braveheart. What is your opinion about Islam? Obviously, I have a great amount of respect for one of the world's most predominant and interesting religions. My point is somebody was talking about Muhammad, and I was trying to ask about historical inaccuracies that I see cannot be reconciled with the historical record looking at Muhammad. That exists for every religion, by the way. So, to be fair, I have a great amount of respect for Islam, its history, the Islamic Golden Age. Muslims were one of the most productive and wealthy societies and advanced societies in the world between about the 10th century and the 13th century, and that went to pot for different reasons. Does a tie make people smarter? No, I make the tie smarter. If you gained a large platform, do you think you would be able to resist financial pressures to persuade people a certain way? Is human decay? I would hope not to. I don't know. I would rather stay like this, small and making a little bit of money and entertaining and informing, than to become a shill and a sellout. When you said that the left is sympathetic towards Islamists, you mean more fringe leftists or mainstream leftists? I think both. I mean, the president of the United States wouldn't call ISIS radical Islamic terrorism when that's clearly what they were. What happened to Muhammad on the nights of Al-Su'ud? Is this the night ride? Is this when he went from Jerusalem up to heaven and met Allah? How important was the Spanish, where Alaska is, supposedly, the Dome of the Rock? My British friend says we were an irrelevant country compared to England. The British are going to say that because they're British. Yes, you hit it. Pretty disingenuous to say the United States, who gained a lot from the war, didn't gain too much. They didn't win. I never said that they didn't gain anything. I said they didn't win. Oh my goodness. This is the 30 Years' War. 30 Years' War only involved the Europeans. If you look at the First World War, 7 Years' War involved many different places, such as South America, the United States, Canada, and India. Not candid or typically by pretending that thank you. Not candid or sincere, typically by pretending that one knows less about something than one really does. Thank you, Russell. Thank you. That's the pinned comment for today. Thank you, Russell. It's good to see that pinned instead. Can you elaborate on the Russian mind? I don't know what you mean about invasion. Russians have been fearful of foreign invasion ever since the Mongols and Batu Khan. Russia lost 27 million in World War II or World War III? Absolutely. We didn't just get the Star Spangled Banner and something else. That's oversimplification and disingenuous. No, it's not disingenuous. What did America gain from the war? Andrew Jackson became famous. Generals learned experience. Generals learn experience in every war. William Westmoreland didn't learn anything when he was screwing up in Vietnam? Why do Muslims hate gay people when Muhammad was a bisexual man? There's no evidence that Muhammad was bisexual. That's even less historically founded than any of the other stuff I've mentioned. And Muslims do not hate gay people. There are many gay Muslims. Why does the federal government not? Again, this is somebody with a bias who shows that more about themselves and their homophobia, dare I say you doth protest too much, than they actually do about an actual system of beliefs or a group of people. Why does the federal government not respect the 10th Amendment? They have no power to make laws outside of the Constitution. That's not true. They have no right to make laws outside of the constitutional jurisdictions, but they do have rights to make laws as the Constitution grants them. Taxes are not in the Constitution, yet Congress makes taxes law. I mean, the basic, that's not, no. The Constitution, they're not allowed to make laws outside of the Constitution. They make plenty of laws outside of the Constitution. They have constitutional precepts that they have to follow, though. Why so many political comments in this historical channel? Because people want the juicy, gory stuff from me, and they want me to talk about history, and they don't want to talk about history. They want to talk about trendy political stuff, and it's a bunch of folderol and nonsense. I'm getting tired of it. If you want me to analyze a political perspective, do a super chat. Be like Ymir. Ymir, thank you so much. You're so kind. I really appreciate you. Chess came from India. Modern chess is European. Yep, that's true. Would you like to be a U.S. president? I would not be a good U.S. president. We cannot find Muhammad in the 7th century. Probably true. Nor can we find Mecca in the 7th century. Probably true. We can find Medina. I will say that. Thanks for answering your questions. You're very knowledgeable. Even if you disagree, thank you for your kindness. If Muhammad wasn't real, why would they make him so detestable? Islam spread through violence. You need a strong leader. One of the greatest reasons that one of the greatest differences between Islam and Christianity, for instance, is that Muslims do not like Jesus because he died. They don't like the idea of a suffering God. This idea of a God would come in human form and suffer is abhorrent to a religion that respects force and power. Fuentes has the idea that Churchill was evil, the Germans were the victims of the French and the British, he's underplayed the Holocaust. I mean, that's obviously all historical poppycock. How fast is the world changing and how can we improve it? Learning about the past is how we improve the future. That's what I'm going to say from my historical capacity. Islam is a plagiarism of older pre-existing religions. Like which ones? It's every religion copies from other religions in the past, and you can find the most dissident and disparate connections everywhere. Look at Mithra, look at Horus and Jesus, for instance. But that doesn't mean. But I don't subscribe to the notion that the Christians just stole ideas from the cult of Horus. Why is autumn culturally associated with melancholia? Because it's colder. Can humankind learn for history and actually find a way to stop mountain to fall? Can we learn like Sisyphus and stop rolling the rock up? It's going to take a while, but there is such a thing as progress. I mean, hundreds of years ago, getting rid of slavery just seemed stupid. Now it's the mainstream in most parts of the world. What specifically prevented the Union after being ratified and joining? Prevented leaving the Union. You have the formation of the United States. You have an establishment of the supreme law of the land in the Constitution. There is no, in my opinion, based on everything that we look at, yes, the states have rights. The states have rights to make their own laws, but that never gives the states the rights to leave the nation if they're just unhappy with certain laws, or to nullify federal law, to ignore federal law. That is supposed to be something that is figured out by the three branches of government, particularly the judiciary. So for me, it's not the burden of proof is not on me. The burden of proof is on the Confederates to show where they were allowed to leave. Because it's not in there. There's nothing that says they can nullify and not follow the Constitution. The Establishment Clause, or not the Establishment Clause, the Supremacy Clause kind of implies that you can't. What do you call thousands of Muslims on the bottom of the sea? A good start. Oh, Joey, that's disgusting. No, just no. Okay. I think nationalism existed before Napoleon, maybe Rome. I mean, every society was nationalistic. Napoleon helped spread modern nationalism by his French superiority. The British already had this in droves, but later the other Europeans would get it in resistance to Napoleon. The Germans, for instance. Alexander the Great was pretty good at nationalism. And imperialism. Can you elaborate on the Basque regions in northern Spain and southern France influencing each other's culture? Yeah, it's kind of Pyrenees cultural exchange. They were both Christian areas. The Muslims couldn't quite conquer, even though they tried to. So they obviously have a difference between the rest of Spain, which was and Iberia, which was conquered by the Muslims in the early 8th century. I'm Persian, but most of people don't like Islam, but government forced them to be a Muslim. Interesting. I mean, Persia is the home of Zoroaster. Persia had long-standing Christian ties. Just assuming that it's Muslim, that everyone there is a Muslim, is over the top. Do you think individualism with prestige and fame was a Roman concept? Do you see these virtues as problematic or great? I see them as interesting. It depends on the person who wields it. And I think the Romans were some of the first. Does an object smaller than 400 nanometers have color? I don't think so. What's the cat's name of the prophet of Islam? What's the cat's name of the prophet of Islam? I don't know what you mean by that. Let me see. Gotta go. Okay, Steve. The Al-Zuit were tall, dark men who rode Muhammad all night in the desert. Oh, come on. You're really going to go with that to prove that Muhammad was bisexual? Can you talk about Mongol? You mean the Genghis Khan and his horse archers wreaking havoc, conquering huge sections of Asia, and then his grandsons basically conquering Russia, large sections of Europe, all the way to Persia? Did gay people exist in ancient times? Yes, many people were gay in ancient times. The ancient Greeks were quite... Actually, our live stream lecture this weekend is part 2 of Ancient Greece, I should say. So we're not voting this weekend, but we will vote for next weekend. I'm doing my second part on Ancient Greece. And yes, homosexuality was a huge part of Ancient Greek culture. The Romans practiced it. The Egyptians had it. The Mesopotamians practiced it. Let me see. I still haven't caught up to the chat, and there's a lot to go. So I'm sorry if I wasn't able to get to everything. Thank you, Mr. Yeast. I really appreciate that. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. Come back tomorrow. We're going to be doing this an hour earlier, 6 p.m. Eastern instead of 7 p.m. Eastern. And you can get all of your questions answered by a historian about history and social studies. It's great to see Lewis and other people. And Michelle, I think this is your first time, but really appreciate having you here. Mr. East, I will say this, since people are still talking about the Charlie Kirk thing. If you want me to go into depth about a political topic, usually I do a super chat. But since it's your first time here, I'll say this. I respect the man's ability to want to talk to people about different issues. That's what I'm doing. And so when I saw that he'd been killed, I was stunned. Obviously, it's disgusting and awful. But more than that, it shows how divided we've become. This is Charles Sumner being beat up on the Senate floor. This is bad omens for our future. Just a few years after that was the Civil War. So I'm not going to say I agree with every single thing that Charlie ever said or did, because I certainly don't. But I appreciate the ability to talk to people and knowingly go into environments where the vast majority of people will be antagonistic to you and engage in pretty civil dialogue to the point where South Park likes what you say. I give him a lot of credit for that, regardless of what I think about immigration or abortion or tax policy or Donald Trump. I'm not going to share my opinions on that, but I am going to say I respect what Charlie was doing because I'm a Democrat in the sense that I'm a Westerner and I believe in the ability of free speech. I believe highly in democratic principles, and I think Charlie was living that out. And with the fact that he got killed while doing that is just so awful to me. So the politicization of his death, the celebration of his death is a despicable omen for our culture, and the politicization of his killer is another disgusting thing. And Henry, thank you so much. I really appreciate the super chat. Anything you give to the channel goes back to the channel. So, yeah. But, all right. I'm sorry, I had to skip ahead. Yeah, Alexander was gay. I'm not ignoring the details. I just don't agree with your interpretation of the details. Why did King James politicize the Bible? He was trying to unify England into one church, and the Puritans wanted to fix the church, and then the Pilgrims wanted to separate from it, and then they went to Holland, later to America. And we got another super chat from Tanya. So appreciate you. You're a member. You get early access and all that stuff, and to give a super chat on top of that is just so kind of you. Thank you so much. Why during the Latin American War of Independence, the countries that were like Ireland did not get independence? Yes, they did. Some of them did. Hispaniola, for instance. They were smaller and easier to control if you're thinking of Cuba and stuff like that. And AZ, thank you so much for the donation as well. Really appreciate you. Yep, we need the super chats. They help the channel a lot. But yeah, I want to see if there's anything else I could touch on real fast. It's not saying the Constitution up to the states can secede. No, it doesn't say that the states can secede. Yes, the U.S. achieving some of its goals during a war doesn't mean it won a war. How can Isa judge on the Day of Judgment? Only Allah can judge. Well, if you want to go from a Christian perspective and just use the term Allah as the name of God, as the Arabs do, as Arab Christians do, according to Christianity, Isa claimed to be Allah. which is, and the Jews, like the Muslims, do not believe God can appear in human form. So there you go. That's why they think that. Why are right wingers also sympathetic towards a problematic ideology? If you get too far into any ideology, you can be sympathetic to some bad stuff. Prophets' bodies cannot decay. Interesting. That would mean Jesus' body did not decay. I don't know if that's true, Rami. Jesus was a prophet, so his body didn't decay. They just deny crucifixion. I do know that. Thanks for answering questions. My pleasure. Contrived narratives that appears to be objective in convo, yet use certain terms and words to portray genuine concern, belief, or understanding, but underlying contempt, bias, or position. Disingenuous. Thank you, Stryker. I did not do any of that, so yeah. Maybe it is stupid, maybe it's helpful, but I should announce that my best friend in Iran, which has a lot of Muslims people, is gay. Well, I hope he's okay and safe, no matter what. Let me see. Anything else? Okay. Woodrow Wilson, Jekyll Island. Yes, he did go to Woodrow Wilson. Oh, we mentioned Woodrow Wilson. Great. You need to attend your stream definitely more often. This was medicine for me. Well, I'm glad it was cathartic for you. It was cathartic for me. Yo, we went to high school together, Benny? Oh, Benny. Your sister was kind of hot, I'll say that. Anyways, yeah, never had any problem with any religion. Well, that's good. Neither do I. People need religion. It just seems historically that it's part of how cultures develop. You can't develop without a spiritual beliefs, a spiritual ethos. And if your society loses that spiritual ethos, it will be replaced with something else that isn't always as good, regardless of what you think of the religion that it has. It's your female relatives calling for OnlyFans. Oh, jeez. Why was the bombing of the cartel ship controversial? Because the whole thing was, are they cartels? Can the president do this? And what threat do they pose? Islam is not, and also, of course, the shadow fourth one is anything Trump does is bad to many in the media, to the Democrats. There's just nothing good he can do. After his presidency, acknowledged his part and was ashamed. I wouldn't be surprised. Him acknowledging and owning up to it doesn't sound like him. Why did you just say friendly history? What did you just say friendly about Benny's sister? Well, Benny said we went to high school together, and I just remembered him, and I remembered his very attractive sister. After his presidency, he acknowledged his part was ashamed. Woodrow Wilson has my subscription. Go watch my live stream lecture on Woodrow Wilson a couple weeks ago, because I'm almost done over talking about that guy. When was the 8th Amendment ratified? Along with the other 9. And that's the unreasonable fines and cruel and unusual punishment. What were your thoughts that some people view history as nerdy? I'm okay with that. I'll take it as a compliment. I prefer geek, but nerdy, I've heard it before. All right, so I didn't fully catch up to the chat. Are we still talking about Woodrow Wilson? Really? As Trump said about Jeffrey Epstein, the New York financier who he was a little too chummy with. Okay. And yeah, no more master debating today. What was the curse inscribed on Tamerlane's grave uncovered by the Soviets, real or coincidental? I don't know. I think it might have been... someone might have sketched it afterwards. I'm not sure. Tamerlane was a famous derivative Mongol ruler who created an empire in Afghanistan in the 15th century. David, I'm so glad. I'm so impressed with what you do. I've been doing the same thing, and so it's good that you found us. So the war that rages in mankind is a developmental trait. Interesting. No hate. I just never considered. Yep. Release the Epstein files. Yep, that's a great way to spot. See a British war. See, you're not happy, because I will hit Harry about his British stuff, and then I'll hit you. You'll hit me about America. So you know what? That must prove that I'm doing a pretty fair job about this. And yes, good for you, David. Good for you, Amir. Good for you, Little Duck. And show some love to Rodolfo and Hars, who did a great job moderating today, as they always do. Hars, put the social media handles in the chat one more time. You guys can follow me on all those other platforms. You get updates, early access, and other things like that, as you do if you become a member here at the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel. We're also on TikTok, so you can go and follow us there. I'll put the TikTok up for everyone to see. We went way over. Longer than I expected to go over, but that was because you guys were asking such great questions. And so really good to see you guys. And tomorrow we'll be doing part 2 of the Q&A for another hour. And then Sunday is our part 2 of our live stream lecture on ancient Greece. So if you want a topic, a focus topic, look at Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern for ancient Greece. And I can't find the social media for TikTok, but oh well. This is a great talk. Really appreciate everybody for showing up. Why is your view mitigating to the highest amount of negative actions Wilson did, but amplifying the low amount of negative actions Johnson and Buchanan did? That's useless and disingenuous. Yes, we've already talked about this. I'm not going to talk about it anymore. Hars, you've heard my commentary on this. Woodrow Wilson did not start the Civil War. There. And on that note, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your Friday. Sorry if that was too loud there at the end. Tine, be careful. You need to be... We have Muslims in this chat who are wonderful people who do a great job, who love history and deserve our respect. And I really appreciate having them here. Do I need to do a super chat? Yes. If you want me to go into depth about this controversial Woodrow Wilson thing, give me a super chat. And shalom to you, Axel. Woodrow Wilson, or salam, I should say. Woodrow Wilson burned down the White House with the British. Yes, Woodrow Wilson crucified Jesus, and Woodrow Wilson caused the bubonic plague, and Woodrow Wilson is the man who invented COVID. There. Now you know exactly who Woodrow Wilson really is. I'm trying to be impartial as I can. People push and shove each and every way, but I try to stay right in the center. And that is where I will be meeting you from, the center, tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern. Really looking forward to it. Take care and have a great rest of the night. Farhaj, you're going to have to wait for tomorrow. As always, everybody, love history. Bye-bye now.